You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
So we go ahead and get started in the conversation. I'd first like to welcome you to the Devil Dog Talk Show. Today we have Amber Capone, and I'm pronouncing that correctly, please? Yes? All right, nice.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah, I always try to get names right. It's kind of important, right? So yeah, today we have Amber Capone, and you might have heard of her from VETS, which is, if you mind plugging that one, I can never get the acronym right.
Yeah, it's an acronym for Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions.
Nice. Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. Nailed it. Awesome. And you are a spouse and co-founder of VETS, correct?
Yes.
So it's both you guys, both you people. I don't know what the appropriate way to say that is now.
You are not going to offend me.
Okay.
I'm totally fine with whatever.
Okay. Awesome. And so I found you guys a while ago. I've been doing kind of a series lately on discussing psychedelics. We had a few people on, Wiz Buckley, Jared Napier, and a couple others throughout the years discussing just different type of components to the pursuit of getting better. And that's what really motivated me today to get you on. And I'm not even on my right page on my notes. Okay, here we go. And the real reason why I wanted to talk to you today was, how did this all start? How is it in your journey? How did you start from your perspective? And that's something that, I've been digging through the medias, and you guys had this great Q&A yesterday with another lady that was, advocating for vets. And I guess she's, involved with the organization now, but her husband had gone through a lot of trials and tribulations through the medical, process. And that's kind of the perspective I'd love to keep hitting on, because I don't think enough people discuss it out loud. Like I know we, as spouse to spouse, people talk about it. And even when you get into tighter friend groups, it's like, yeah, for sure, we'll, discuss the difficulties, the adversity. But I really would just love to hear your perspective of how this journey began. And, time frames would be great too.
Yeah, so I think you're referencing Lauren Myers, who did an Instagram live Q&A a couple of days ago, and she absolutely crushed it. I love Lauren and respect her so much. We share a lot as spouses of veterans. Both of our husbands were SEALs. Both of our husbands served multiple post 9/11 combat deployments. Where we're a little different is Lauren was also a badass pilot in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
So she brings the female veteran perspective to the VETS program. So she's like a 1-2 punch. She understands the spouse struggle. She understands the veteran struggle. She understands the nuances of being a female in the military. And so she's the director of all of our women's programs. So whether it's female spouses or female veterans, she's just the most incredible leader and mentor for that role.
That's what I picked up. That's what I picked up from the Q&A. I was like, wow, she's dialed in. I missed the part about her being a pilot, though.
Yeah.
I must have jumped in late.
Solid.
That is awesome.
She is rock solid. We are so lucky to have her on the team at VETS. And our story, my story with Marcus starts way back in 1997 when I met him. Of course, there was no 9/11 at that point. Mm-hmm. I was very young. He was young. I was 17, almost 18. He was 20. And he had played football for my dad in college. So we were sort of a one shot in a million from the very beginning. And as the years went on, he became a SEAL right before 9/11 happened. He graduated SEAL training in October of 2001. So it was right after 9/11. And then, just this constant series of adapting to life in the military, adapting to him being a SEAL, adapting to this new war tempo. And over the years, a decade plus of that, it really started to take a toll on our family. And so we got out, he got out of the military in 2013, and we were not prepared. Like, our nation has never seen anything like the post 9/11 era for service members and veterans. For the first time in American history, someone could have completed an entire 20-year career during a time of war. That's unprecedented. I had several uncles, great uncles in the Navy and the Air Force, and they did like a tour, 2 tours, 4 years. I think 1 or 2 of them actually did retire, but there was never a time of war this consistent for so many.
That's a great point you bring up. That is a great solid point.
We're not prepared as a nation to care. The veteran care has suffered, I think, for a very long time. I don't know if it's ever been right, but it certainly is going to increase in magnitude as the years go by for this very special generation of American soldier. And we found ourselves, completely ill-prepared for the transition. We weren't ready to be civilians. We had no support system. Luckily, Marcus was medically retired, so he did have a pension. He did have health benefits. A lot of the veterans in our pipeline and veterans that we know couldn't do 20 years of sustained combat. And so they got out of the military without any sort of support network. Maybe they weren't medically retired. Maybe they don't have health coverage. It's this perfect storm on the other side of service. So, there's this loss of identity and purpose and community and belonging. And then you're back in the civilian world and you don't feel like you fit in. You don't feel like anyone understands you. You have compartmentalized all these experiences and traumatic events over a significant period of time. And then it's like surveying the damage after a storm. I grew up in the Midwest, so kind of in Tornado Alley in Southern Illinois. So we had tornadoes. It's easy to prepare for a tornado. The weather's coming, the wind's blowing, you get to the basement, you survive the storm. But when it hits, and you have to clean up that damage, it is brutal. And that's what we found ourselves doing. We had survived, in our case, 13 years of the SEAL teams sustained combat. And we had learned to do that pretty well. It was very dysfunctional, but we could handle it. What we weren't prepared for was how to be normal. And so surveying the damage when we emerged from this survival mode was terrible. And it escalated because as more and more time went by, Marcus was willing to try things. He's in my opinion, very high performer by nature. And so he wanted to be better, but nothing was working for him. So he had just exhausted everything available to him, talk therapy, tons and tons and tons of pharmaceuticals. And he was growing more and more hopeless. I started getting him into brain clinics because I'm like, gosh, it just the PTSD, the talking, the meds doesn't fit who I've known for half of my life. And as he was also, not having very much luck with the brain clinics, I really started to lose hope. He was losing hope. I know that, he would say things to me like, how am I supposed to live the rest of my life like this? Like, I don't even want to be here right now. How am I supposed to think about doing this for another 40, 50 years? And I knew that it wasn't sustainable for me either. Even if we were not to stay together, which it felt inevitable that I just couldn't live like this much longer at all.
Yeah.
I thought that maybe he would take his life. I was really, really afraid of that. And so I felt like I was racing against a clock, but at the same time, nothing was working. So one of his friends had shared with us about a psychedelic experience outside of the US. He had traveled to Mexico and done Ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT, and he thought that it could help Marcus. And so at that point, I was willing to try anything. I tried to convince him for quite a while. I mean, when I first brought it up to him, it was...
Was there apprehension to something like that at first?
Oh, yeah. Huge.
For both of you, or was
timeline.
it... Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
We met in 97.
Got you.
He graduated SEAL training October 2001. He was medically retired from the SEAL teams in 2013. From 13 to 17, our life was just in this like perpetual spiral. From the outside, I think people thought we probably had it together, although, there started to become obvious cracks in our life. Like we weren't able to hide it.
Now on that, I don't want to interrupt you, but on that, I find just a very good thing to hit on. You held things together, right? And you acted normal. And coming from a person that's been through it, my wife and I as well, that I feel like that is the niche conversation that nobody's really hitting on. Like for you guys to go from 97 to 2013, like that's a long life together. You guys were intimate on all different levels. You know each other. It's like you grow up together. That's a very unique relationship. My wife and I are complete opposite, like just completely opposite, right? And it's really awesome because to me, it's like you would know when his micro breakdowns are occurring. And for me, being a corpsman, it was something very unique to see with operational tempos, like you're bringing up, that there's these little things you have to be paying attention to, not these grandiose like DUIs are there, or assaults are there, or getting in trouble or fighting, that happens a lot, but it was more so these little details. So I just want to go back to that part of the story when you noticed this shift, like you guys got out and the process of applying. Of course, he got medically retired, but there's still the VA. There's still a lot of what medications are going to work or not, who's going to have the continuity of care, discovering the path for continuity of care. And then a friend brings in this conversation of Ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT. How did that all affect your guys' path? Like from that point on, when you noticed these little things you weren't be able to, keep in-house, so to speak. And at that point, what was it that really showed this is definitely it? We got to convince each other. We got to try that, How did that go?
I think we were just desperate at that point, and I didn't necessarily even know what it was. I just knew that someone that we really loved and respected, it was a couple, a guy that Marcus had served with, another SEAL, and then his wife. They had shared with me because they knew that we were having a tough time. And I think, there's just such an inherent trust there. And I was also so exhausted that I thought, I don't know anything about this, but I trust them. And when I brought it up to Marcus initially, he thought it was absolutely crazy. And to your earlier point, like we'd spent so much time apart that these sort of micro adjustments it was a little bit more challenging in our case because we had spent, like almost 300 days a year apart. So a lot of his life, it was being lived completely away from his family. And I didn't see or know or understand these things. But as we spent more time together, and certainly after the transition out of the military, I became very concerned. And it's taboo in our community to admit you're having a tough time. And so I think that we were up against a lot of stigmas and a lot of lack of sharing of information because no one wanted to be like the guy that everyone else would talk about. And so if not for one of his former teammates who took his life, and then his wife doing a brain autopsy and sharing their results with the community, and actually like doing an article in the newspaper one Memorial Day, I read the article, and it was the first time that I heard about traumatic brain injury and blast injury. And then everything started to make sense to me. I was like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't purely a psychological thing that he just can't get past. So my method of dealing with him up until this point had been like, you're tougher than this, you're better than this, you just do the work and fix yourself, and guilt and shame and condemnation. I was also very jaded and resentful and exhausted and feeling like unheard. But then when I realized that there could be more going on a physiological level, I had unbelievable compassion for Marcus. And that's when I started getting him into brain clinics. I'm like, well, if this is a brain thing, we live in the most advanced country in the world for things like this. Surely there's help at brain clinics. And like 5 of them later, he was becoming more and more depressed and despondent, because they're great for diagnostics. They're not necessarily great for, okay, here's what to do in making your life livable.
Nice.
So
That's very, very, very difficult. And that path of going back and forth to doctors, it's just, it eats away at the soul. And, you know, I isolating something like brain injuries, you know, there's a lot of different types of brain injuries. There's the traumatic brain injury, and even there's different classifications of brain injury. So for our listeners, I'd just like to go ahead and tap on that for a brief moment. Traumatic brain injury, TBI, or MTBI, which is multiple mild traumatic brain injuries. And if you have a brain injury, let me tell you what, there's no such thing as mild or moderate. It's just bad. One of the great studies that I got to work with when we were doing research was we discovered, and by we, I mean the scientists, and I'm the guy scraping the pig shit in the background. We discovered that the microvasculature in the brain can actually deteriorate over time due to blast waves. So the brain is actually enveloped in such a way where there isn't a protection system on certain aspects of your brain. So this front area of your, forehead between your eyebrows and up over to where the hairline begins, that's pretty much it. In the back of the skull, and there's a little teeny tiny bumpy area. You can see a little, on men mostly, a little deposit of calcium. That's about it. And on the sides, you get hit in the side. Well, that's where your KOs come from in boxing for the vast majority of the time. And what happens when you get a KO? That is a traumatic brain injury. Your lights get reset and reset and reset, and before you know it, brain injury. Muhammad Ali, right? Like they say it was the same thing as Michael J. Fox, but it's like, come on, man. It's the same diagnosis, same procedure, neurological deficiency, injury. And then you have, like you were saying, the multiple doctors. They're finally finding these things out with CTE, TBI, mild TBI, multiple mild TBIs, the death to certain capulatures or capillaries within the vasculature of the brain. And the neuroscience has been developed to the point where it's crazy. So coming into a bridge point where your guys are going back and forth, you and your husband are going back and forth to doctors trying to figure out, hey, what are the next steps, man? Like, that's great. We know something's messed up. We could have told you that, but what's the next steps, bro? Come on. So how did that go?
Yeah, I think, for Marcus, it was like a double-edged sword. On one hand, he was like, okay, great. It's good to know that there is something, there are lesions on the brain, or there are areas that aren't communicating. The diagnostics were really great in showing like, okay, you have trouble with balance and coordination. There's definitely something here. So it took some burden off of him. I'm sure that's like, okay, it's not just me. It's not something I can't get past. It's something that is like happening to me. And yet it's also terrifying to, at that time, he was a 40-year-old guy. He had been a very elite high performer. My words, not his, because he would be like, no, I was average, whatever. But in my opinion, he had been a very elite high performer for a very long time. And so for him to be told by a brain clinic, you have trouble with memory and recollection and balance and coordination, it's like, wait, what? And yet it was indicative to us that there was more. So anyway, we started all these brain clinics, and it was really going nowhere. And I could tell that time was running out for him, for us. The hope was running out. And I thought back to the timeline in 2016, I believe, was when this other SEAL had told me about the Ibogaine journey and the possibility of doing that in Mexico. When I brought it up to Marcus then, he was just starting with the brain clinics. We were both way more comfortable with the Western approach. We both thought it was absolutely nuts. I didn't fully understand it. But as time went on and it was becoming more and more dire, I circled back on that and reached out to that SEAL, another SEAL who is a doctor, sort of spearheading all of this. And I just said, like, I need your help, you guys. I'm going to lose him, and I don't know what else to do. And so I worked with them and the spouse of the SEAL to get Marcus a date and get him out of the country to try this. I reapproached him once the plans were almost completely set. So I gave him... Yeah,
that's smart.
I gave him a loving ultimatum. I mean, at that point, like I pretty much was handling everything anyway. But, I said, I will never leave you and I will fight for you every day for the rest of your life, but you've got to fight with me. And I never really approached him like that. I had always been guilting, shaming, all of those ugly things. And
now, do you find that more of a common motivator within the community? Because for me, I talk to myself that very same way. And there's a lot of the community mindset is based off of performance, and like you're saying, you don't want to be the guy that everybody talks about, but you also don't want to be the guy that's a detriment to anything that's going on. And that's a scary environment. That's such a tempo that I've never experienced. I've experienced a lot of different things, but that's something that I relate with, because simple, when you're discussing it, when there's nobody to turn to, you'd be surprised what people talk to about, just in general to the docs. Like, you're coming in for your random blood work, or, your annual blood work, spouses and everybody, they share a lot when you bring out a needle. Like everybody does. It's really, really interesting how this system works in our brains. Fight or flight, or just talk your mouth off, So that's really an interesting dynamic. And when you say that you were doing everything, I would, you brush it like it's everything. I'm like, what is everything? For a lot of families out there that never have supported a military person, or a disabled person, or a person that has mental health needs, what does that encompass?
Well, it was all the logistical everything. It was the decision making. It was holding down the house. It was paying the bills. It was making sure that the kids were taken care of, while also making sure that Marcus was on the right path. And that was everything from, doctor's appointments to getting him out of the country, making sure that he was supported. And, we had a lot of support from the 2 SEALs I was working with and the spouse of the SEAL. And we really had no idea what we were embarking upon. I had actually decided to leave Marcus shortly before, because he was running out of funding. He'd been to like 5 brain clinics at that point. That was my last hope. And he'd been out of the house for several weeks doing these, weeks, months long intensives at brain clinics. And it was peaceful in our house for the first time. And the kids were happy and no one was walking on eggshells. And so I would see him looking out the window prior to that, or like when I would go visit him at the brain clinics, and I would say, help me understand what you're battling in your mind. Tell me what you're thinking about right now. And he would say just how much better off you and the kids would be without me. And even though there was peace in our house without him there, he was still on this earth. He was still accessible. And I realized that despite the peace I was feeling, we would live a lifetime of torment if anything happened to him. And I would have wanted to know that I had tried everything, really as a way to start to heal or forgive myself if the worst happened. So the thing with Mexico was like, truly that was it. And I didn't think it would work because nothing had worked. And this seemed crazy. Marcus was like, he was like an athlete. He was a college athlete. He did not do drugs. He did not hang around with people who did drugs. Like, this was drugs in our mind. And it was weird. When you are so like against the wall, you will try anything to save someone you love. I knew that my kids would have, a lifetime without their father if we didn't try this. I couldn't stand the thought that we had survived so many combat deployments when so many of our friends and their friends' fathers didn't come home. And the thought of losing Marcus in this capacity just seemed so preventable and avoidable. So I didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into, but I knew that it was worth a shot. And so I arranged for him to leave, and because I approached him with love and grace instead of like guilt and shame, and like, yeah, he's a very competitive person. You tell Marcus he can't do something and he's going to do it. So
That's
but
awesome.
using those tactics in this capacity was not working. Like telling him he couldn't do it, or telling him he's better than this or whatever, wasn't working, because that voice in his head was already saying the same thing. So my agreeing with him was only reinforcing those thoughts he was having staring out the window. My family would be so much better off without me. And that is not true. So
now you say
approaching
that. I want to bust in just for a second here. You say that because it's really remarkable. I've said that so much to my family and my therapists and everybody else. And then it becomes more, like you're saying, a validating truth. Hey, well, let me point out how it would be better. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, section A, B, C, D. And then by the end of it, you're like, well, why are you still around then, bro? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like me personally, I come back and forth with it, with that thought of the family would be better off without me. And the conclusion isn't, oh, I'd be in Mexico, huffing fish poison or frog drips. I don't even know what's available now in these drug games. But no, I mean dead, like just gone out of the picture. And you're saying something that's very remarkable. And we're gliding over the subject gracefully, but it's something that really needs to be brought up. The Gold Star families of people that have passed in combat. And then when they come home, and a lot of families are stuck with this, there's a multitude to digest, right? There's the moral injury of loss. There's the ethical practice of what's happening with veterans. And then there's the principle of, well, why can't I do better? Why can't I overcome this by myself? I'm this X, Y, and Z, this identity that we construct in order to perform and be. And even you as a spouse, you said this was your breaking point. Like you literally hit your limit. This is the love of your life. You fought for I don't know how many years. I'm not going to do math from 97 to 13.
20 at that point.
Thank you. Not that good at math. So at that point, and you're fighting for each other, because here's a gentleman, and this is just my perspective real quick. Let me project a bit. Here's a gentleman saying, you're better off without me because I love you so much. I don't want you to miss out in life and its beauty, right? So the observation is for twofold. You're literally finally experiencing some peace and you're feeling guilty about it. That's what I'm hearing. And here's Marcus realizing that he's creating this eggshell environment for everybody involved. And you guys come together at this point, this let's call it a breaking point or a breakthrough point, right? And you decide to schedule this for him instead of having that long conversation about what it is, what it isn't, hey, jump out the plane, pull your shit. Let's see if it works, right? That's the type of approach for a lot of people that I find use or try psychedelics. And that's something that's very beautiful because to me, here's two people fighting tooth and nail to get through a next day, right? And have those people that are in your life still around. And with the thoughts of course, children involved, it's even more difficult because you're going like, well, it's not just me. I'm not just being selfish. I'm really looking out for them. And then that long run is, well, how do you look out for them if you don't know an answer or if you don't have faith or hope? Like there's a breaking point to everybody on this planet. And I think it's unique to this experience, especially yours, where you've defeated the combat, you defeated the enemy, you've defeated all these things, these demons, right? And then you come home and it's peaceful. And now we are a peacetime war machine currently, right? Biden turned that off probably for 6 more months and then Ukraine's going to kick off. Watch. But my point is, for the time being, we're at a peaceful, maritime, wartime, machinery here. Now, with that, you're going into it blindly and you said you were hopeless, but this is it. You have to try. So when you finally got him down to Mexico, what was that experience? Were you there with him or did he journey with, several friends? Was it something?
The same SEAL that had shared with us and helped me get him there was there with him. He never left his side. His spouse picked me up at the airport the next day and took me there. And I got really nervous to go because I knew that this was our last shot. And I was so scared of, like, I wanted to delay what felt like the inevitable, which was another thing that didn't work. I had so much hope in it, yet I struggled with the thought of hope in general at that point. And so on the way there, I just said, I can't do this. I can't do this. And she said, you're going, because we told him that you were coming and he's asking for you. And I thought, like, that was different. That I remember thinking when she said that, like, oh, I wonder if it did work. Why would he be asking for me if, he was still feeling the same? And so, I saw him for the first time, and it was like immediately my soul knew that it was okay. Now, that's not to say in the days following that I didn't have moments where I was like, whoa, 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 like, what did we do? What is this? This is crazy. It's too good to be true. It won't last. Or he would start to get into like a downward spiral-ish, which are necessary, by the way. Like, this process for anybody is not linear. It is a series of ups and downs. But over time, if you think of a stock market ticker, there are downs all the time, but generally it's trending upward.
Yeah, that forward progress. You support that. Yeah, no, that's awesome that you bring it up.
That was actually a huge part of the process, was taking advantage of those downs to learn new tools and getting out of them. But when he would start to have them, I would start to freak out. Like, oh my gosh, see, I got to put the walls back up because it is too good to be true. It didn't work.
It's self-defense at that point. You're guarding your own identity, and you're guarding your own fear, right? And it's not based off of, pretend. And I think that's a great topic point real quick to say, in those moments, how did you overcome that fear? Was it, did you find your outlet? Did you construct a hobby? How did you refocus those tools? I bring up tools a lot, like anchor points and, spelunking and all this great support system, metaphoric crap, right? But at the end of the day, how do you prop up your support system, and how did you overcome that fear of, hey, we're relapsing, or this is, going back to where it was? And, how do you maintain that as well as your self identity at the same time?
I had gone through a couple of years of my own spiritual journey healing. I had become really, really, really reliant on my faith, and I was very in touch with my intuition, with God, with just, I was having like more or less visions of what was to come. And it didn't make any sense at the time. So I have recorded in journals everything that's happening at Vets today that I wrote when things were at their absolute worst. Some of it before Marcus was had gone to Mexico, and some of it right after. Wow. And so I held on to that. Whenever I would start to fear or doubt, I would realize I'm in my flesh as a human, fearing and doubting a work that is happening by the grace of God. So I need to get back into my spiritual eyes and to feel and stay rooted in truth and not let fear knock me off course. And so I would say that was the number one thing. I was also working with my own therapist, who is instrumental in keeping me focused on me and letting Marcus go through his healing. And for me to understand as the spouse, I can't do this for him. I can't save him. I can't fight for him or do the work for him if he's not willing to do it for himself. Like, I can support him, but I can't do it for him. He's got to want it and he's got to do it. And so I became less concerned with doing and more concerned with supporting and seeing and feeling and, manifesting really where I wanted to go. Marcus gave me a really great analogy when he was he got back from a defensive, it's not an analogy. He gave me real life advice, which I later put into an analogy. He'd gone to a defensive driving course and he came home and he was like, babe, do you know why people wrap their car around like the one tree in a field or the one telephone pole on the side of the road, because when your car goes out of control, that's what you lock eyes on that and you go directly to it. So I realized that I was doing that in our life. I was locked on for years to what wasn't working. I was so caught up in looking at the catastrophe. I wasn't looking at staring into the open field.
Wow.
So I stopped staring at the problem and I started staring at where I wanted to go. And I just started like manifesting that. I've got a vision board right in the corner of what I want for my life. And I look at that. I don't look at the problem. So as I was, on my journey and supporting him on his journey, it just all started to come together. Now, Vets comes into the picture because at that retreat, he turned to me and said, "This is exactly what the guys need." And he was referring to his teammates. We thought at the time that maybe we could raise some money to help our friends, like the guys he served with. And we didn't really even think beyond that. We did that. And our friends became friends of the guys we were supporting, which became friends of friends of friends of friends, and it goes on. And then it became support personnel and the broader SEAL community. And then, because of the stigmas associated with asking for help, saying you got help, saying that you were struggling with thoughts of suicide and psychedelics, you add all of that together, like it's a huge risk to step out and say, we did this or this works. Especially like Marcus has always had a really great reputation and I really respected that. And so we didn't want to like taint his reputation. It was, so good. We don't want to like let it to look unfavorable that he did drugs. We were just so caught up in
the
honestly
appearances of things and stigmas, like you're saying earlier. Yeah. Like you brought up a very, very powerful point with the stigmas, even in the communities of special operations, combatants in general, but military service members. You're told that you can ask for help at any point in time. However, there's an underlying meaning to that. Okay, and it usually means whatever you're doing stops, okay? And you become the thing we have to move around and get rid of in order to fill your billet. You're the problem. You're the thing that is what's wrong. Not this, not anything else. And when you remove somebody that is, literally given their life to that, like I could only imagine. I've talked to several team guys, several recon dudes, like all the time. You see a lot of this fear of maintaining your life and lifestyle, you said your that thing that everybody cares about. I can't remember what it's called. Reputation. Thank you. Sorry. No, it's important, right? Like who wants to be tainted? I mean, I don't. That's a smelly area to begin with. But if you have, the reputation, I think that really adds to the difficulty for asking for help and exploring options. Yeah. Like the name really breaks it down very well. Why can't we look into some things? Like what's better than, trying new things? And by new, it's actually really old. And that's something I really wanted to get in with the conversation on how you said you guys developed a kind of a network, like an underground, private network. And that's usually what happens in a lot of communities. And then there's a breakthrough or breakout of information.
Everything we were doing at the time, and still to this date, has been outside of the U.S. We were very cognizant of that. It needs to be done with respect to U.S. law. Now, that doesn't mean we're not trying to change U.S. law.
Yeah, that's important.
But for the time being, we were not necessarily establishing an underground network so much as we were just raising money quietly and telling our friends. And of course, it took some convincing at first. It was like, you did what, dude? Like, no way. And then as more and more people started to find out about it, then we started to get calls. And so it just happened very organically. It was definitely grassroots, but we were not brave enough to speak out about it because of all the fears and stigmas attached. We also don't like to bring attention to ourselves. Like, and there are many things about this whole thing for us that are very uncomfortable. We don't love posting on social media. We don't love being out in the spotlight. We're willing to do it because we feel called to do it. And we're totally committed to standing in that gap. But what gave us the conviction to stand in the gap was the suicide of one of my best friend's husbands. We had kept this to ourselves we wanted 12 months to go by and 12 other friends or, individuals to have the same outcome that Marcus did, so that we would know, would this last even for Marcus? It seemed too good to be true to wrap our heads around. Was like impossible. We were totally unprepared for, what the results were. We also wanted to make sure that it would work for more than just a handful of people. We definitely ended up helping more than 12 people in that first year, and the outcomes were looking really good anecdotally. So we were about to start speaking out. We were working on a retrospective study at that time. We just hadn't really told anyone. And at the 11.5-month mark, and Chad was one of Marcus's former teammates too, he took his life. And at his funeral, I was just sitting there, like, overcome with such emotion. I'd been feeling it before the funeral. I wrote about it in my prayer journal. But at the funeral, I knew, like, without a doubt, we've got to do something. And I just committed to speaking out. Marcus was not as enthusiastic or, convicted necessarily as I was, but he was willing. And so he's really the one that had to stand in the gap and to say, with all the stigma and all the judgment, and in a community that means the absolute world to him, he had to stand and say that this is his truth. And I really, really, really admire him for that.
That's a scary, wow. Honestly, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing that he's standing in the gap that you pointed him to, that he could fill, and very well do so with his reputation, his success, militarily, however you want his career. And you're here looking at it from probably multiple perspectives for the gentleman that passed away, right? Motivated by success, and again, also within fear, and seeing a grander potential, right? Here's these outcomes. Like, my guy, my husband's doing this. Like, sure, there's lulls, but we're progressing to a point where, look, like, we gotta start talking about this. And to me, it's like, well, it's kind of like this, that whole camaraderie team, two's better than one, one's better than none type of thing or approach. But here you are in your journey, in your world perspective, and carrying the support system and the network and the vision, right? You laid it out and you're like, this is my prayer journal. This is my journal. I'm noticing things. These are my emotions. It's very amazing to have such a well-tuned in person, just in general. And then to be able to apply that when you're starting to see success, like the day you got to see Marcus after his medicines treatment, right? What was that like? Because going back to that, and then I want to leap down a little bit in between because we brought up a bunch of great conversation. Focusing on when you first saw that effect, when you guys reconnected, how did that become the new normal? How did you support that? How did it integrate into your lifestyle to where you're feeling more confident, or you're not and you're afraid? Like, how did that go about?
Well, I had known Marcus since I was 17. We met when we were very young and very innocent. And, we had quickly adopted to this drumbeat of, like, war deployments and a culture and a community that was, I think we were, I could certainly appreciate it. And I love the community. And I certainly feel like we both just immediately fit right in. But, it was not like anything either one of us were accustomed to growing up. And so we had kind of, like, become totally different people and totally different lives. Like, we were married, but we were not really like we were not living as a typical married couple. We just never really saw each other. So I think I was holding on to the hope that I could get some semblance of the guy that I met back. And when I walked in and saw him for the first time, I 100% felt that. I felt the essence of him that I knew and came to love as a very young girl was back. And so, his demeanor was completely changed. Marcus was like the coolest, most laid back, charismatic, lovable guy. Like everyone loved him. He never met a stranger. He was just so even keel and cool. And his energy was so good. And then he had become, over the years, and especially after the transition to civilian life, like a monster, like nothing like he used to be. So to feel his energy, and I really don't know any other way to say it, is just his energy, his aura, everything about him was exactly how I remembered it being when I met him and those years before the SEAL teams. And then, transitioning that into our daily relationship took a lot of work. We had to do so much work as individuals and as a couple to be able to come into the relationship that we have today, which is it's so good. It's so freaking good.
That's amazing to hear. And that's something that I really always want to make sure we bring point to, is that even when things are hopeless and it's the most dark, there's metaphors for this and I can't remember what it is, but just hold on, keep trying. And to hear that the medicines that he utilized is now being championed by vets and yourself, with the history that you've had and the ins and outs of what you've been through, where do you see vets going in the future? And what type of vision do you have for yourselves together?
I don't think either one of us thought that this would become what it's become. It's truly blessed by the hand of God. It is everything that was on my heart that made absolutely no sense 5, 6, 7 years ago when things were absolutely, at their worst. We are honored and humbled to be in this position where it feels like the only thing we can do is be radically obedient to a much bigger plan, and the sheer blessing of God in bringing back hope and healing and health and light and love and connection and community. If we can be a vessel for that, and this can expand beyond our friend group and beyond our community and beyond special operations and beyond the veteran community, beyond America, into the world, it's got to start somewhere. I feel just so much gratitude for every bad day that we've had, for every dark time that we've experienced. And I would say to anyone that is struggling with thoughts of hopelessness or helplessness, suicide, that there is hope. And our story is proof of that. I think that, one life can have an impact that ripples out and touches countless lives. Marcus was so close to taking his life. And if you think about the beauty that has come from the fact that he didn't do that, and his life is now being used to touch others, who will be used to touch others, that could have been immediately extinguished if he would have acted on his suicidal ideation. So I think that it is important to understand that these therapies are not the end all be all. They're not a magic cure. They allow someone an opportunity to do really hard work. And he's done that. We've both done that. I've chosen not to use psychedelics as part of my healing journey. He's chosen to use psychedelics of course, as part of his, and he does an annual reset. It's just a gift that he gives himself. And then in the 365 days between, he's doing something every single day, whether he meditates twice a day. He doesn't miss. He does breath work. He does yoga. He's on and off kept a mindfulness, a gratitude journal. I do that constantly. We both have found what puzzle pieces work for us, and we are responsible to ourselves and responsible to one another to get up every single day and put our puzzle together. And if there's a piece missing and something's not right, we can usually go back and say, like, oh, we didn't put in the meditation piece today. We didn't put in the supplementation piece today. He works out every day. He takes a ton of supplements. He practices gratitude. He shows love. Like, these are all things that are very intentional that were made possible because he freed up a lot of space with the anger and resentment and trauma and darkness that he was carrying. The psychedelics helped him to purge that, to get to the root cause of why he was feeling this way or that way. And then with all that new space that's created, he was able to put in a ton of new habits to carry him through. We see it all the time at vets. People come in and they're like, they run the spectrum from, I know nothing about psychedelics, but my buddy said to do it, to I've researched this for 2.5 years and I've got a 30-day window set aside and I'm going to go on a silent meditation retreat right after my psychedelic experience. And there's everything in the middle. What I've observed is that people are getting out of it what they're willing to put into it. And if they really have done their research and they really are committed to the process, their chance for long-term success is exponentially greater than someone going, yeah, I'll try it. I'll take a pill and see what happens. Even that might work a little bit, but if someone really wants to maximize the overall experience and the longevity of it, they've got to be supported in preparation, especially integration after the experience, the right sourcing, the right dosing, knowing that the facilitator is trained and doing this for the right reasons, putting in lifestyle shifts and habits after the journey, becoming part of a community again. We offer all these things at Vets, and I think that's why our efficacy rates are so high, because we are looking for individuals that are willing to put in the hard work, that understand what they're signing up for. Their spouses are supportive. They're willing to come back into the community aspect of healing together. And they take the whole process very seriously. I worry a little bit, so does Marcus, about some self-experimentation and sort of like this buzz that's been created in the veteran community, like, oh, psychedelics, that's where it's at. They're going to take care of all the problems. No, they can actually cause more problems if someone's not properly supported. So we're huge advocates for setting, sourcing, dosing, prep, integration, and community support.
Yeah, that's awesome that you bring that up. I find that to be extremely important nowadays to kind of distinguish the difference between experimenting frivolously, right? Or without intention. I shouldn't say frivolous. Nobody knows. I mean, I don't know everybody. Come on now. But for the aspect of mentality to be brought to your guys' organization and how to integrate prep, the whole set and setting, Madison Margolin talked about that she works on the Double Blind magazine and also is promoting a new book. Check her out. It's just really amazing because to me, the same notes are carried over into kind of your song and their song and this song to make a good sound. And yeah, that's me being a little audio engineering weirdo. But to me, it's like, hey, if we're figuring out something's working and this support system, this network, the way it's working, and if vets can prove empirical data this way, that way, and we're having a constructive progression here, and there's the support system, and there's the integration system, and there's the preparatory work, and here's the follow-up and the follow-through, and here's the reasons why, and here's the motivation why. That's a very easy thing to get behind and support. I mean, don't get me wrong, been through the rigmarole myself. talking to different nonprofit organizations, working with different nonprofit organizations. And I could say, without a doubt, you guys are more dialed into the approach than maybe you give yourself credit. So for like a lot of people, we talk about the larger nonprofits that are well integrated into government systems. They're there. They're not ever going to breach out to this type of approach. Why? Because it's still, in general, pretty stigmatized. Even the fear, like you were discussing, if somebody's going to randomly try stuff and not go through the process, what does that make what you're doing look like? Like you were saying, reputation back, about Marcus in the beginning, it's still very important. But having people support at least the thought of maybe this might work. I always go back to the VA makes roughly $300 to $400 billion a year to try things. That's a lot of dollars. That's a lot of them. And then there's nonprofit dollars throughout the entire United States. This is internal sources, right? There's hundreds of millions, if not several $billion being generated off the concept, let's end veteran suicide. Now, if you're broached or at least approached about a subject such as, Ibogaine, 5-EMO, DMT, psilocybin, psilocin, MDMA therapies, you got it's not Versed, it's the other one. I can never remember the name of this one, but it's something you get at surgery, and it's like a ketamine. Thank you. Yeah, ketamine. I could never remember that one because growing up, everybody would discuss Special K, and of course, there's going to be fear-based stigmas on every drug. Like we grew up in an era where people literally they crack an egg and be like, "This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs." I'm like, yeah, but which ones? Because that's crazy. And now here we are in 2023 having the conversation. Now, for vets, how does one get engaged and how does one qualify or quantify? I don't know the metrics for assistance, I should say.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to circle back really quickly to what you said about, like approaching the therapies. And I think it is important that we start to view them as medicines and having a place in our medical system, because they're very unique in their mechanism of action. But of course, it can be abused or used improperly. If you just look at opioids, they have a place in our medical system. If someone has surgery and they need pain relief for a short period of time, there is a place for them. If you start doing opioids, recreationally, or as if you become addicted, it's really just like, that's not the same. Same for psychedelics, psilocybin or LSD or some of the other ones that people think like, oh, this is just doing drugs. I view it completely opposite. Like it has a place as long as it's used in a certain context. Same thing with ketamine. It's like if you are approaching this as a therapeutic intervention and not a way to numb out. So I think you can either lean into healing or you can numb out. And it's your relationship to whatever that compound is that dictates if you're leaning in or numbing out.
That's great the way you said that. I'm like blown away. That's really good. That's t-shirt quality. That's like lean into therapy. Don't numb out. Like honestly, like I came up with the great idea applying therapies daily, right? And there's a bunch of different tools in the toolkit. There's a bunch of different ways, and there's a lot of different perspectives to bring into the conversation. I love the way you brought that in. You have to change your perspective on this. It's a medicine. And if you don't, you're right. It's very difficult to combat those stigmas. Man, that's powerful. That is.
Well, a lot of the, I guess, leadership in our community have expressed concern, like, isn't this just an excuse for guys to go to Mexico and do drugs? And it's like, absolutely not. It's the exact opposite of that. Anyone signing up for this is signing up for potentially the hardest thing they'll ever do in their entire life. It's taking years and years and years of repressed trauma, compartmentalization, physiological injury, moral injury, spiritual disconnection, and like mixing it all up and putting someone on a completely new path. if they're willing to do the hard work, they're going to come out in a totally different direction. So if you just can make 1 degree of change over the course of time, if your life was headed this way, over time, you're going to be headed a completely different direction. And that's what psychedelics can do. But they've got to be done in the right context with the right intentions. And of course, the right follow-on aftercare. To answer your question about how to engage with vets. So this started as us helping our friends, as I mentioned, and then their friends, and then the broader NSW community, and then the broader special operations community. Over the course of 5 years, it's gone from our immediate friend group to every branch of special operations. And sometimes there are questions posed or concerns like, well, why don't you offer this to all veterans? If I'm being completely honest, and Lauren went over this too, we can't even meet the demand within our own community. The SEAL community alone would put us over our number of allocated grants per year. So when you're talking about all 4 branches and some special circumstance grants and some spouse grants, it's just impossible to meet the demand. We advocate for all veterans. We are trying to get research passed in every state to get more studies going for all veterans to participate in. So like all veterans are certainly on our radar. Right now, our funding is allocated for special operations veterans who have post 9/11 combat tours. So anyone can apply on our website, vetsolutions.org. We get every single application, whether it's SOF or not. We do try to provide 1 to 3 to 5 grants, depending on funding per quarter for non-SOF or non-SOF spouses. But what Vets is offering that really no other, I think, no other retreat, no other organization is offering is this incredible wraparound support. We have something going for our grant recipients 6 days a week. The only day we don't offer something is Saturday. We have multiple things on many of those days, whether it's meditation training or guided meditation or integration calls, spouse calls. The programming is phenomenal. And so to keep the back end programming going for hundreds of veterans is also a challenge. So the best way to get involved, I would say, is just to do our e-course, which is free on our website, to engage with us on social media. We try to put out incredible educational content and to follow what we're doing, because we're 1000% advocating for every single United States veteran, whether they've seen combat or not, whether they're post 9/11 or not, whether they're SOF or not, and we're advocating for their spouses.
That's amazing. That's something that I'm glad you brought up, because again, me personally, I've been through a lot. So of course there's a lot of bias, right? Everybody that's traumatized, you build up these things, apprehensions, fears. And without talking about it directly, it allows things to be perceived differently. And so for you to just hit that shit head on, like right on the nail, like, bruh, look, check it. We're at capacity, but P.S., this is where it could be. Elon Musk, listen up. Like, if you want to look for donation dollars, this is where it could be. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, stop investing in other things. Invest in this. If
it really is an investment.
It is, because when you're talking about the warfighter community and the spouse, and I don't mean warfighter like they've been to war. I mean, as in you're in the capacity of serving for war. All right, that's what every military veteran personnel is and will always be. However, when you're looking as an investor, right? Because I'm pretty sure you probably schmooze and booze at the 501(c), like networking galas and all that great stuff. I have. And let me tell you that the key interest is promote something of value. Like everybody says, work on your, elevator speech. And for me, doing the show for over 10 years now, it's like, that's really key, is network. How do you talk to people that are in the know? The doctors like Dr. Sue Sisley that are pushing forward for cannabis, and as well as psilocybin now. The conversation for MDMA. Who are the great resources to discuss what is actually happening in real time? And I just love the way you guys conduct yourself on social media, because you're not hyper glamorizing something. You're not selling snake oil, right? For a lot of people, and even yourself, it sounded like you had that, that first moment, like, I don't know, man. I don't know if this is going to work out. And a lot of people say that. And I'm like, so kind of, taken aback. And I'm like, wow, why is it the fear we allow ourselves to kind of control? And then at the end of the day, when the results come in, why aren't we heavily invested in this, right? If we can invest in something, and I'm not going to say what that something is, that it was developed within 9 months. I'm not saying it was a baby. It wasn't. It was something else for a very important thing that other people are saying was important. And we applied it on the planet to everything, everywhere. Why can't we do that for other things? Like, I mean, I'm not saying like a lot of people dying of X, whatever that X was, but if a lot of people are dying of veteran suicide, and I'm just going to isolate this demographic real briefly, veteran suicide kills roughly 20 to 44 people a day. We don't know why those numbers are that outlandish or who's counting all the numbers. And don't get me wrong, the demographics are based on what any kind of bean counter wants to say that day or how they want to make statistics look. Now, however, that times 365 is a lot, okay? And if that's literally a population of a small town. You say you grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a small town, and where I'm living now, the population is roughly 9,000. So 1,000 less, if we're not going to maximize the numbers, it's roughly 8,000 people a year die. Now let's say if an entire city of 8,000 people were to just disappear from one year to the next, as a responsible citizen in the United States that cares so much about X and the development of Y, which was whatever it was, and we applied that same, let's do something, let's take action, hey, maybe we can do some stuff. Maybe there's a greater, like you were saying, I really love the way you put it so eloquently. There's this God-driven path. And the moment you take your hands off the wheel and you say, Jesus, take the wheel,
Pretty much what I did.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's a beautiful moment in life to fall on your faith sword and give that direction, To wrap it up now, I really want to get just one couple bites left. How do we support? Is there donation specific website, or is that's the one donations website that, hey, if I was like talking to Bill Gates tomorrow or Jeff Bezos, I'm not saying I got a friends list like that, but me and Elon, we're tight. Not. If I could pitch that to somebody, what would I be looking to say, do, or get them to get to?
Well, I would say that, it is an investment, especially for anyone who cares about veterans or cares about advancing psychedelic science, because, by investing in the lives of those that were willing to give their lives for us, you're not only investing in that life, but generations to come for that person's family, for their loved ones, for their lineage. It really is an opportunity to give someone their life back. And for this special generation of soldier that has fought 20 years of sustained combat, if you were fighting age on 9/11 or the years shortly before or after, you're in your 40s or 50s now. You easily have half of your life left to live. It can be a life where you're not just white knuckling, you're actually thriving as opposed to merely surviving. So it's an investment in that capacity. For anyone who's just very interested in supporting psychedelic science and seeing these therapies become available in our country, I think that leveraging the veteran voice and what we're seeing in terms of like veterans really being at the tip of the spear of this whole movement, which will inevitably impact our entire nation, not just veterans. They're a non-polarizing community that is very purple. And I say that because we're seeing both sides of the political aisle come together around this topic.
Oh my God.
So,
I just understood what you meant by that. I forgot the basic color schemes. I'm like, wait, what does she mean by? Oh,
yeah.
Blue. Got you. That's good.
Very, very, very encouraging to see the bipartisan support around doing what's right for veterans. And so if we can get this going for veterans, get research initiatives, we know the research will be favorable, but we also know that we're going to hit a threshold with philanthropic funding as to how far the research will go. We need federal dollars. We need state dollars to get more studies going to prove the efficacy of these therapies. So, it is an investment. I'd say for anyone who's interested in just learning more, go to our website. Our website contains all sorts of educational tools. It contains the free e-course. And of course, Vet survives solely on donor dollars. So there are links to donate on the website. There's an opportunity to create a personal fundraiser to share on social media or with someone's network. Lots of ways to get involved with our mission at vetsolutions.org.
That's awesome. And you know what? On that note, we are going to have to wrap it up. I don't want to go over on your time. I know, you guys got a busy schedule clearly. And I just wanted to say thank you for your time. I truly appreciate the conversation. I hope our listeners do too, and decide to go ahead and click the link that I'm going to be adding about vets and the donation dollars and getting people in that direction to just learn as well as to contribute if it's something they're passionate about. Again, I can't be more appreciative of your time and your conversation. And if you have any shout outs that you'd like to get across the planet, this would be the time.
I'm just am equally as grateful for the opportunity to be on the podcast. And I'd like to give a shout out to Representative Correa from California, a Democrat in Congress, and Representative Jack Bergman, a Republican, former Marine Corps general, who have just formed the first psychedelic research caucus in Congress. And the rule is you have to join with your opposite party. So I feel like this beautiful, no-nonsense leadership in doing what's right and starting these conversations on the Hill is a really incredible step in the right direction for all that's to come in this movement. So I think that if we can spark a spirit of love and connection and respect, this nation needs that.
That's so beautifully, very, very well put. Wow. Honestly, that is just, it's motivating on a whole new level. And I couldn't appreciate your time more. My God, I'm getting tongue tied. It's usually within an hour I start falling apart. But thank you.
Thank you so much.
Internet's hello. Invases and dollars number does what and he's yes, yeah, for them represent our race number 6 is yes,